If you've been wondering what the 4 types of business data are and how to go about migrating data to the cloud, then this video is for you, because I'm about to give you one of the most concise definitions of the 4 types of business data, as well as a strategy for how you can move your data to the cloud. Be sure to stay to the end, because that's where I'm going to show you how you can actually customize and adapt your strategy, your data migration strategy, for the exact specifics at your company. And for the very best data leadership and business building advice, be sure to subscribe to my channel so you'll be first to know when the next episode drops. Also, thank you to everyone who's been leaving comments and sharing with me content ideas, suggestions. I really appreciate it, and it's going a long way to growing this channel, so I just want to take a moment and say thank you. Now, I always start videos with why I'm qualified to share on any given topic. So why I am qualified to share on data migration strategy. I've been working on technical strategies since 2007, and I've been doing data strategy since 2014. So that is 14 years of technical strategy and 7 years of data strategy, or something like that. So I've been around the block with strategic planning in the engineering and data space. And if you're new around here, hi, my name is Lillian Pearson, and I support data professionals to becoming world-class data leaders and entrepreneurs. Okay, clearly the first thing we need to talk about today here is what is data migration. And so that's super simple. Data migration is just the transference of data from one system to another. So that could be, a traditional relational database like Oracle, or it could be something like a more novel big data storage solution like NoSQL. But the actual data migration part of it is just moving the data from one system to another. Heck, you could even say that moving data from one computer to another would qualify as data migration. The other thing that's relevant here is we're talking about in this video, I'm going to share with you cloud data migration strategy, but you can actually use it for on-prem as well. And in case you don't know the difference between cloud and on-prem, say you have your company's data is sitting in one cloud and you need to move it to another cloud environment. That would be, cloud to cloud migration. A lot of my clients take data from on-premises and then migrate it to the cloud, or you could actually just be migrating your data between two on-premise solutions, which is what I've actually seen a lot of companies based in the Middle East doing. That's a whole other topic, but let's just keep going with why. Why would what are the most common reasons that companies need to go about cloud data migration? So I listed out a few of the reasons based on what I've seen from my data strategy clients and why they actually embarked on a migration project. In some cases, they needed to get a new vendor, and vendor recommendations were to migrate it. Other times, they just need to replace old equipment and keep up with the times. This also goes along with the tech changes. So in the data space, our technology, especially data engineering, which is responsible for things like data storage, data migration, pipelines, the technology is changing really, really quickly. And so just to keep up with the technology changes in the data space, a lot of companies are doing their cloud migration project now. Also, if a company just has their data in a lot of different systems and it's kind of a really big mess, then they want to move it and they want to consolidate it into one storage system. That would be another reason people embark on data migration projects. And then lastly is, of course, mergers and acquisitions. So if your company gets sold or merged into another company, then they also need to merge the data systems, the data resources. So that is why many companies start on a data migration project. And so the one thing that I want to point out here before going any further is that your data migration strategy really needs to be based on the type of data that your company has that you're actually migrating, which is why I'm going to cover what the 4 types of business data are, and then we talk about the strategy for migrating each type. Okay, so now let's run through what are the 4 types of business data, and then what the data type actually has to do with your migration strategy in terms of the concerns you need to account for when building that strategy. The 4 types of business data you'll be encountering when you're building out your strategy are structured data, unstructured data, semi-structured data, and then, of course, sensitive data. Now, structured data is relational data. So it's the type of data that you would see, say, in an Excel spreadsheet. Typically, customer data is structured data, or it's the type of data you see sitting in is a relational database system like Oracle, and you can query structured data using SQL. Compared to unstructured data, structured data is much easier for business users to consume, as well as data scientists who are building predictive models off of data. Structured data is just easier as a starting point. But in terms of how the structured data type impacts your cloud migration strategy, you just have to take into account that systems or databases that store structured data tend to perform more efficiently when they are nearby one another. And when I say nearby, I literally mean physically in closer proximity to one another. If you're doing on-premise data migration, then you need to think about where the actual storage systems are placed in proximity to one another and make sure that they are in the same location or very nearby. Whereas if you're doing a cloud migration and you're moving everything to the cloud, it's actually very nice for you because you can kind of outsource the actual engineering, the built system design part of your storage solution, and just pass that responsibility off to the actual vendor, the cloud solution provider. Moving on to data type number 2, unstructured data. So unstructured data is basically data that doesn't have any sort of predefined schema. It could be any sort of rich media like photos, audio files, video files, and this type of data is generally stored either in a key value store in NoSQL or some sort of data lake. Another thing to keep in mind is that the unstructured data is actually stored in its native format, and the data schema actually stays undefined until you need to bring the data out of the system. Some of the benefits associated with working with unstructured data is it's very fast and quick to actually collect data, and you have flexibility in terms of your data storage solutions. When you store unstructured data in a data lake, then you can actually store on a pay-as-you-use basis. Actually, our conversation here is about to get quite a bit more technical, so I thought I would pop over to my machine so I could kind of show you what I'm talking about as I'm talking, just because the whiteboard is great for simple topics, but we're going to go into quite a bit of complexity here. One moment.
In the modern data ecosystem, unstructured data is often processed and enriched using external APIs, like data pipeline APIs, AI services, and video APIs. But when you move data from a file system to the cloud, you have to make sure that the file metadata and the ACL are all preserved so that you can use your existing permissions to access the data. Migration tools can help minimize issues associated with migrating unstructured data. In terms of semi-structural data, this is data that lacks strict structural framework and can't be organized in a relational database, but it does retain some structure. This includes open-ended unstructured text arranged by tags, and tags are often named by subject. So for example, imagine your email. Email content is unstructured data, but emails can still be organized and sorted according to semi-structured categories like sender, recipient, and date. Those categories would be the tags. Some of the advantages of a semi-structured data include the fact that you can get support for hierarchical data to simplify complex relationships. And also, you can avoid complicated translations of object lists into a relational database. And there's also the serialization of objections in a lightweight library. Moving into the fourth type of business data, there's sensitive data. And sensitive data is information that requires strict data protection and cannot be accessed without special permissions. This includes both physical and digital data, which is stored and used restrictively to ensure privacy and comply with legal obligations. According to most data regulations, sensitive data is defined as any information that cannot be disclosed without authorization, and this includes personally identifiable information. In order to protect sensitive data, you'll need to make sure that it's encrypted both in transit and at rest.
I would love to get to know a little bit about you. Tell me in the comments below what type of data you work with in most cases on a daily basis. I promise to reply back.
Congratulations on making it to the end, because now I'm going to share with you how to go about adapting your strategy to different types of business. Now, of course, a data migration strategy is definitely not a one-size-fits-all solution. So you'll have to adapt according to your types of business data, as we covered earlier in this video. In terms of structured data, it's really best to use the automated tools that are offered by cloud providers. Pretty much all cloud providers have automated systems that can take structured data in particular databases, assess them for migration compatibility, and then move them reliably to the cloud. Now, if you're moving unstructured data, it's important to evaluate your unstructured data and look for how it's being used in production applications. If the data is commonly accessed by production applications and is mission critical, consider doing an online migration in which on-premise data sources are continually synchronized with the cloud. Another factor to consider is the size of the data. If the data set is very large, you can use storage appliances to physically ship the data to your cloud service provider without having to transfer it over a wireless access network. For semi-structured data, integrity is a really important consideration. So perform checksums to ensure the data hasn't changed from being copied from source to destination. If possible, move entire virtual machines or file systems to the cloud. This is really the best way to preserve the integrity of the data. When transferring sensitive data, It's important that you evaluate if the cloud environment is sufficiently secure to meet your security and compliance requirements. If it's not, a possible alternative is to use on-the-fly data masking. This involves modifying sensitive parts of your data set as they are copied to the cloud environment. For example, you can mask customer names, social security numbers, or other personal identifiable information to avoid having to meet compliance requirements in your cloud environment.
Look, data migration projects can be long, tedious, and expensive, and extremely complicated. Whether you're looking to learn more about data migration basics or cloud migration, I did a video on evergreen data migration strategies, and you may want to check that out after this video in order to pick up a more incremental step-by-step approach to data migration. We'll leave a link to it in the description below, as well as in the cards to this video.
All right, so now we're going to talk about developing an effective strategy for migrating data to the cloud. And this should really happen according to 4 main phases. The first phase is objective assessments. The second phase is proof of concept on a subset of data. The third phase is production build, and then the fourth phase is post-production. So let's look at each of these more closely. In the first phase, objective assessment, it's important to know your existing infrastructure, database, and software schemas in order to effectively plan your migration strategy. Starting by evaluating business use cases of a data lake, as well as considering security and prioritizing the data of applications you want to move first. This will help inform the effort, timeframe, and cost of migration. Moving into the second phase, we are looking at proof of concept on a subset of data. And before you commit to a new cloud provider, it's really important that you test the waters by developing a proof of concept project. This proof of concept will help you compare and also validate performance, features, and network issues. Test your workload to establish insights about cloud services provided, such as storage and security requirements. Also evaluate the scaling of clusters. Moving into phase 3, production build. Once you've verified that the cloud provider and migration model meet your requirements, you can begin the actual migration process. You should move your data and application to the cloud according to a phased approach, taking into account many different factors, including infrastructure, especially with respect to how to migrate, storage and compute, networking, sizing, and scaling. If you're moving data from an on-premise platform to a data lake in the cloud, then you want to evaluate and consider the data ingestion retooling. Other things you'll also want to account for are data security and access governance, cloud resource usage, inventory of on-premise data, translation of data transformation pipelines to cloud mechanisms, strategy for migrating applications, in other words, forklift or rewrite. Lastly, there's a migration of historical data you'll need to consider, as well as data lake management requirements. And then moving into the fourth stage, you've got post-production. And once you've successfully rehosted applications and data, you can optimize their performance by automating processes in your new infrastructure. So you use an automatic testing framework, perhaps adopting an infrastructure as a code approach in order to streamline the deployment process. Manually double-check the more critical aspects of your infrastructure, such as performance, security, and compliance. Still with me?
I hope you've really liked this video on the 4 types of business data and how to go about building a strategy for migrating it to the cloud. There's really a whole lot more that's involved in terms of technical and strategic planning required for, in particular, a cloud migration project. If you would like me to do all of the heavy lifting for you, then I definitely recommend you check out my data strategy action plan. It's a 44-step sequential plan of action for data professionals who want to get their next promotion by leading profit-forming data projects. I will put a link to it in the description below in case you'd like to check that out. Also, we have a really cool Facebook group called Becoming World-Class Data Leaders and Entrepreneurs. You are invited to join us, and I'll put a link to that in the description below as well. And if you like this video, be sure to show it some love by giving it a thumbs up and tell me in the comments below what topic would you like for me to cover for you next.